Hey, it's Jared. Well, I've been an iPhone user since the very first iPhone. And really, I've been an Android user since the very first Android. But predominantly, I always end up being an iPhone user first. That ends up being the phone that I carry with me most of the time is an iPhone. I have the iPhone 15 Pro Max here. But I also have the Galaxy Fold 6. And these foldable devices have been really intriguing to me because I'm a person who often carries an iPhone and then maybe even carries an iPad Mini with me as well because I want a little bit more screen real estate for performing certain tasks and stuff like that. And the iPhone sometimes is just a little too small for that. So the Fold 6 is definitely a device that is intriguing to me, and it might even be intriguing for you as either an iPhone user or somebody who has been thinking about foldable devices. So I hope that maybe this discussion helps you, through my experiences, think about what it might be like to go with a foldable phone for a little while. Now, in full disclosure, this is not my first time using a foldable phone. I had the Fold 5 last year and I spent time with that. And the experiences that I've had over the last couple of weeks with the Fold 6 are pretty much the exact same experiences that I've had with the Fold 5, with previous foldable type phones that I have had a little bit of time to spend with. I did purchase this phone, as I did my iPhone. I don't get anything for free from Samsung or from Apple, so I'm just here to talk about my experiences in hopes that it helps save you some money from either purchasing a phone that you're not sure you would use, or maybe make the decision to go foldable. Let's jump into it. First of all, let's talk about the Fold 6 form factor. Now, I have the Fold 6 here with a case from Pitaka on the back of it and a MagSafe magnet adapter here that allows me to have a nice grip on the back of the phone. I also like this because this phone is just not well balanced when sitting on the table without something on the back of it. And with this on the back of it, it sits nice and flat. And yes, I can rock it if I really try, but it sits nice and flat right now. It's almost a must to have something on the phone to raise up from the camera module, the camera bumps here, so that the phone doesn't just rock on the table. So the Pitaka case combined with this, which also gives me some more stability to holding onto the phone and keeps it safe in my hand, I think is a win. So the form factor of the phone is definitely the huge noticeable elephant in the room. It is a thicker phone that folds and opens into a larger display, which is its killer feature, the fact that it has a larger display. Then when you close it down, you have a smaller display on the outside here, which if we look at compared to the iPhone is almost as tall as the iPhone display, but you can see is significantly more narrow than the iPhone display and is narrower than most other slab phones that are out there. And that's where this screen experience becomes a little bit of a challenge for me. If I want to navigate my phone through this screen, everything is just a bit more narrow, such as the keyboard. So as I'm typing things in, the smaller screen just makes for a smaller keyboard and it's a little bit trickier. Usually those keys are going to be spread out a little bit wider and it's going to be a little bit easier to get around the keyboard. So I end up utilizing swipe a lot more on this, which slows down my typing a little bit, but with a little bit of getting used to it, it wasn't that big of a deal. Everything is going to be a bit more narrow, so when I'm viewing websites, things are going to be skinnier. I can rotate the phone and go into a landscape mode, but as you can see here, the phone is then very short, and it's very hard to see a lot of the content on the screen because a lot of the navigation ends up taking up a bit of space. So there's a challenge there. The phone is also significantly thicker. Even if I take off this back off here and hold these phones up together, you can see that the Fold is a bit thicker. It's not terribly thicker because I do have a case on this phone that adds a bit of thickness to the iPhone as well. It's not significantly bigger, I guess. If I was to take both of these cases off of both these devices, it would be a little bit thinner. But the case that is on the Fold 6 requires some adhesive to stay in place. There's actually some adhesive that runs along this side that keeps the case on so that it doesn't get caught on things. And that's a challenge of this phone that we'll talk about a little bit more later in the video. But all those woes start to change when you open up the device and you're presented with this nice large display. Everything is big. So if I'm browsing those websites that I was complaining about being too narrow on the front screen, I've got plenty of real estate in here, which is absolutely great when I'm doing anything, even when I'm in the call dialer, a lot more space. when I'm Google searching, when I'm viewing the camera, there's a lot more screen for me to preview my image and look at all the settings and all of that good stuff as well. So you can see here some of my selfie tests and then a few camera tests as well. The bigger screen is definitely nice when it comes to viewing YouTube content, browsing other video content, even Instagram and stuff like that. Having a little bit bigger of a display is kind of nice. I mean, look how much bigger everything is here. Absolutely great to have that bigger display. But most of the time, I find myself using the outer display. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we get through the video. So there's also this big hinge area over here, which some people say really needs to be covered up because you can get dust and debris and dirt and stuff in there and causes issues. I haven't had any experience with that. Of course, I haven't had this phone for very long, but I did have my Fold 5 for quite a long time. I had that phone for, I'd say, about 8 months, and I didn't have any issues with that. Yes, the inside display would sometimes get some pocket lint and stuff like that I would have to, flick out of there, but I didn't experience any issues with the hinge getting any grime or anything down in it. So as far as form factor on the Fold 6, I have to say it's gotten much better. There's now no more gap, and there hasn't been a gap between the displays when the hinge is closed, which is great. Everything is nice and flat and very sleek and slim, about as slim as this phone could possibly get. In the rumor mill, there's discussions of a foldable Samsung phone that is just as thin as an iPhone or maybe even a Galaxy S phone, and that means being even slimmer than this, which could be crazy. It could be crazy to think that a phone could get slimmer than this and still be a foldable and have such a display on the inside of it. So now let's talk about software experience. I'm not going to get too deep into this because the debate between iOS and Android is a debate that is very personal to a lot of people. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I've been an iPhone user since the very first iPhone. I bought the first iPhone with the 8 gigabytes of storage. And then as far as Android goes, I have had at least over 100, maybe close to 200 Android phones. It may even be more than that. I'm not too sure. I have had a ton of Android phones over the last long span that smartphones have been out. And my first Android phone was not a slab style phone. It was a flip phone that had Android on it and a physical keyboard. It was one of the first Android phones, and I had that. I also had some of the first Android phones from Google and have had pretty much every Android phone from Google. There are things that I absolutely love about the iPhone, and there are things that I absolutely love about Android. So I'm not going to get in an argument about which platform is better as far as the software, because they both have pros and cons on either side of the fence. I will say, if you're considering switching, there is a little bit of a learning curve, but not nearly as much as there used to be with using an Android phone versus an iPhone. It basically just comes down to navigation and a little bit of where to find things on an Android phone that's different than an iPhone. But if you know your way around an iPhone really well, you're probably going to find your way around an Android phone pretty easily. These days, the unique features that Android used to be known for are getting slimmer and slimmer as Apple adds additional things. Like Apple has added widgets in, and I feel like Apple's widgets have surpassed the quality and functionality of widgets that you would find on Android. But widgets are a relatively new thing in the grand scheme of things on iOS compared to Android. And so Android has always had widgets. Android widgets are resizable. You could position them wherever you want. But this is something that is coming with iOS 18, the ability to resize your widgets and position them wherever you want. Even if you want to have gaps on the screen, you could do that. These are things that used to be major gaps between the platforms, but those things are coming together. I'd say I still do really like the Android notification system better because everything is just easy and more clear, whereas with iOS notifications, I do like the fact that they stack sometimes, but it just becomes a little bit more of a challenge to see some of those notifications. And I feel like Apple can clean that up a little bit. But then again, we also have a stacked mess here as well. And it's not as apparent sometimes that my stacked messages are in fact stacked, because if I'm not paying attention to the little number there, then I might not necessarily see them. One thing that I do notice on Android is that it does seem just snappier to move around the user interface and open things up. Things just seem to move around a bit faster, whereas the iPhone is a little bit more natural and slower, which is fine. But when you're used to using an iPhone and then you move over to an Android phone, you're not necessarily held back by how fast you can swipe anymore, because the phone absolutely keeps up with how quick you move and how fast you might want to navigate between things. Both phones have multitasking and all of that good stuff, so it's easy to kind of get through all of the apps that you might have had opened. I have to say though, one thing that this particular phone has, and most Android phones have, that the iPhone does not, is the ability to open up apps and then open up a second app and use split screen. Definitely really cool to be able to do that and then resize and reposition your apps and have split screen apps. That is a feature of Android that works on smaller devices like this that you're just not going to get on an iPhone. So one of the biggest differences is going to come down to the apps that are available. Of course, most apps that are from relatively big name app developers or companies are going to be available cross-platform. You'll be able to get that app on an iPhone. You'll find that app on an Android. However, not all apps are available. I have my private pilot's license and I use ForeFlight on my iPhone and on an iPad. ForeFlight's not available on Android, and maybe one day it will get here, but it's not available. It would be amazing on a device like the Fold 6, but it's non-existent. That is a very specific app to my needs, but there are a lot of other apps that may either be flat out missing or missing features. You definitely see new features come to apps on the iPhone sometimes before apps on Android, such as with GoodNote 6, which is a journaling app that I use, and the latest updates from the Blackmagic camera app. Now, these again are apps that you might not use, but they're across the board tend to be little differences between different apps that are going to lead to inconsistencies between your experience that you would have on an iPhone and your experience on an Android. So let's talk about folding phone challenges. These are some challenges that I've had with the phone, and it goes beyond just the smaller display, which I talked about a little bit. When I want to open the phone, it is a two-handed process. You cannot open this phone and get access to it with one hand. You definitely could try, and you could try and fold and close it that way, but opening the phone is just gonna be pretty much a challenge. And then you've got the fingerprint reader over here, and I accidentally went into a settings mode here, so I had to tap back. It's just not a one-handed device when it comes to using the inside screen. Now, it definitely helps to have this magnetic attachment on the back, because I could just rotate it and put a finger through it, and I feel much more safe and secure now holding the phone one-handed than I would if I was just gripping the phone, because then I'd have to be gripping the phone really on the screen and obstructing my view. Whereas with this on the back of the phone, I can just hold the phone on the side and not feel like it's going to topple out of my hand. But without this magnetic attachment here and the case that's attached to the back of the phone so that it has that magnetic ability, because the phone itself doesn't have MagSafe, the case has MagSafe, and this magnetic attachment is MagSafe compatible. And so with that, I'm able to feel a little bit more safe and secure with this phone. The case that I have on it does not protect the entire phone. So any security that I can get in keeping my phone safe while I'm holding it is definitely a added benefit. A main concern that I had was app continuity between screen sizes. So when I'm on the outside screen, things being a bit more narrow versus going to the inside screen and there being a lot more screen real estate, I was pleasantly surprised at how well things adapt. So if I was to open up ClickUp, which is what I use for my project and task management, I have a pretty decent display here, very easy to see everything. And then when I open up the display, I have a lot more space here as well. And I could see side by side, which this is not something that I could see when I'm looking at my iPhone. When I'm looking at my iPhone or even the other display, all I can see is one panel of information here, where with this, I could see both the panel of information and also the comments and updates over here on the right-hand side, which is absolutely great. This gives me that tablet experience and something that I'm missing, and it's a little bit more challenging to get that much information all at once when you're on the iPhone. So app continuity definitely hasn't been as much of an issue. With the latest One UI updates on Samsung and just the way that Android apps are natively programmed and coded, most of them look pretty good on the bigger display and aren't too challenging to use on the smaller display. Now, I did briefly mention my thoughts on durability and everything. I have no concerns about the durability of this phone, opening and closing it all the time, the hinge wearing out, stuff like that. I have no concerns there. Where I do have durability concerns is the fact that I don't want to add a whole bunch of bulk to this phone in order to protect it. I have a case on the back, and a lot of cases this year are just rear cases, which I think is a bare minimum for this phone. You need a rear case because the camera modules extrude quite a bit. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the phone is not very well balanced for sitting on the table or swiping or doing anything unless you have something to balance out the phone. So durability, I'm concerned about because I have so much phone exposed here. I most definitely will be putting a screen protector on the front of the phone to protect the screen, but I'm also concerned about the edges of the rest of the exposed phone that's not covered with a case. I would then need to put a case on the phone that covers both the front half and the back half of the phone, and that's going to add significant bulk. And if I add too much bulk, I'm not going to want to carry this phone around because it's just too big to get in and out of my pocket and deal with carrying. So next, let's talk just a little bit about the ecosystem integration. There's definitely things to be said about the Android versus iOS ecosystem when you're using all Mac computers. If you're not a Mac user, then you probably don't really care so much because you're not used to using messages on your Mac or maybe on an iPad to respond to text messages. You're not maybe accepting calls or using FaceTime for video calls across different devices, and so it's not as big of an issue. There are definitely ways to do all of those things on an Android phone, whether you're on a Mac or a PC. It's just not as seamless of an integration. It's not as easy to set up. There's things that you got to do. You either have to install additional software or you have to use a web browser to respond to messages or something like that, depending on the type of device that you have. There's a different process for most of them, and that's something that you have to really kind of understand how to set up. It's not as easy as your iPhone, which is just automatically connected to everything. I will have to say, though, the file system on Android is far superior to the file system on iOS. I almost never know where things are going on my iPhone or even on my iPad when I'm saving files. I always find myself looking and trying to figure out exactly where things went. But on Android, it's just much simpler because you have the Files app and you can sort everything by images, videos, audio, documents, downloads, and then you also have access to your actual internal storage. And then we have our cloud storage here. On the iPhone, it's just a bit more confusing. Things can be stored on the phone. Things can be stored in folders within specific apps. It's just a bit more challenging, and I never really know where things go, especially if I'm saving things quickly and then want to be able to access them. So in situations where I'm managing files on my phone, Android definitely has that hands down. But then when it comes to transferring files to other devices, it either requires a third-party app, the Android file transfer app that's kind of weird and doesn't necessarily work that well, or connecting with a cable to my computer so that I can get access to my files. Whereas on the iPhone, AirDrop works seamlessly and is just a joy to use. So when it comes to wearables, there's obviously a ton more options when it comes to Android, but most wearables are pretty much cross-platform, except for Apple's wearables. The Apple Watch and a lot of the Apple products are going to be a best experience when connected to an iPhone. The Apple Watch really is not going to work unless it's connected to an iPhone. AirPods will work connected to other devices, but they won't work as well as far as touch gestures, being able to control things like the adaptive noise cancellation, things like that. You're not going to be able to access on an Android device. But any devices that are cross-platform, such as these Galaxy Buds 3 Pro or the Capsule 3 Pro Plus from Soundpeats, these are going to work cross-platform and they're going to work really well. My Sony over-ear headphones, the experience on Android and iPhone is equal, and I don't notice any differences in controllability or usefulness of them regardless of which device I'm connected to. So when it comes to wearable watches, you kind of have to decide, am I going to have an iPhone and use an Apple Watch and have the best connected experience there, or have a lot more options available to you if you choose an alternate device that's not an Apple device that either runs on Wear OS or perhaps is a Garmin or something like that. I won't get too into the weeds with my experiences of the Galaxy Watch Ultra, but I have to say I absolutely love the watch. It looks so much nicer than the Apple Watch, but I still have to say the Apple Watch has a lot more functionality and features, is more useful and easier to use than the Galaxy Watch Ultra. but the Galaxy Watch Ultra just looks so much better. I mean, look at those watches. The Galaxy Watch Ultra is a beauty. My experiences with the Galaxy Buds 3 Pro, with the AirPods Pro 2nd generation, is that Samsung is really stepping things up. I mean, I did a review of these, so you definitely want to check them out, but these are just beautifully designed earbuds, and they sound amazing. And I have to say, I feel like they're a little better than the AirPods Pro 2nd generation, although these are a few years old now, so we'll see what happens with the next version. But Samsung's definitely stepping things up with their wearables, and they're tired of being in second place compared to Apple. So let's talk about the camera experience. Obviously, these phones both have a multitude of cameras on the back of them. As you can see, both phones have 3 cameras. So if we jump into the Fold, we have a 1x, a 3x, and a 0.6x wide-angle camera. And so these 3 cameras are the default here. But we also have a wide range of digital cameras as well, which are digital zoom cameras. So for example, if we are out here in front of our iPhone and we shoot with the 3x, you can see that we've got everything's pretty sharp, everything's looking good. If we go into our 10x, things still look pretty good. I mean, I just have to kind of hold still and find a zoom. That's still pretty sharp. But if we go to 20x or even 30x, that's when things really kind of start to fall apart. Although, I mean, as far as the text goes, that is still pretty sharp, and I'm not complaining about that at all. And really the stabilization, I mean, I'm kind of wiggling the phone around a little bit, and it's holding so stable. You could even see it giving me a little bit of a warning that I need to hold more steady so that it doesn't have to fight so hard there. But I have to say, the cameras are really good on this phone. Now, I also have the Galaxy S24 Ultra that I've been using since the beginning of this year, and the cameras on that phone are absolutely fantastic. The Fold 6 tends to lag a little bit behind when it comes to cameras. The cameras are not as good on this phone as they are on the Galaxy S24 Ultra. And I think that experience comes from the screen being better on the S24 Ultra, being a bigger screen. And when I look at a photo or something like that on this screen, it just doesn't seem to be as clear. And I don't know if that has to do with the cameras or if it has to do with the display itself. I haven't spent too much time pixel peeping to really tell the difference. But one thing that the S24 Ultra has is more zoom and more clarity in the long-range telephoto camera. Now, we also have a front-facing camera here as well, and when we're opened up, we have a front-facing camera that you can see highlighted there that's hidden in the display. And so there's lots of cameras on this phone that you can use in any orientation, in any form factor, which is great. On the iPhone, the cameras are pretty standard. We have the 3 cameras on the back, and this particular year, we got a 5x zoom camera. So we have a 1x, a 2x, a 5x, and a 0.5 ultra wide. So the ultra wide on the iPhone is wider, and the telephoto has more optical zoom than the Fold 6. And my experiences are that the camera on the iPhone 15 Pro Max is better than the camera on the Fold 6, and it's definitely faster, snappier, and easier to use, especially if you find yourself using the camera on the smaller display. I definitely don't like using the camera on the small display because the image crop from the camera is only utilizing this amount of space, and in order for me to get more screen real estate, I have to open up the phone, and then the phone becomes a little bit weird and unwieldy of an experience to hold, and I feel like I'm taking a picture with a small iPad, and I definitely don't want to be that guy. And so I don't like using the Fold 6 in this orientation as a camera. I want to be using it in the folded form, but this small display definitely does not lend to a good photo taking experience. So let's talk battery life, because you would think that the Fold 6 is going to have terrible battery life because it has so many displays and the inside display is so much larger. Well, I didn't find battery life to suffer too much in my experiences from using an iPhone, which I easily get all-day battery life unless I'm heavily using the phone, and then I might need to charge at the end of the day. But the iPhone 15 Pro Max can get me through the day easily, especially if I limit my screen time to really no more than around 4 hours of total use. I have, I'd say, close to half of the battery left at the end of the day. Now, with the same usage on the Fold 6, I end up having about the same amount of battery. And that also includes going into the larger display from time to time and spending time on that display. I think that the reason that I end up having a lot of battery left on the Fold 6 is because this outside display makes me not want to use the phone as much. If I'm on this outside display, I'm getting things done quickly. I'm not spending any time on the display because I just don't like it. And so unless I have time to open up the phone and spend time with the bigger display, which is usually when I'm not in a hurry, when I want to relax and lounge and watch YouTube videos or something like that, I find myself spending time there. But my screen time actually went down using the Fold 6, and you would think it would go up because it's more of a multimedia device with a bigger display. But my personal usage actually went down, and I think it has to do with the smaller display on the front of the phone being less desirable to use. And so I don't know if this is a pro or a con. It's a pro in the fact that I found myself using my device less, but a con in the fact that I don't like using the small, narrow front-facing display, requiring me to open up the phone, which I definitely do a lot less. So perhaps this is a good thing. I don't really know. But the battery life on this phone has not been an issue, and even when I force myself to use the phone more with the larger display, I still am able to get a full day's use out of the Fold 6. So where does that leave me after 2 weeks of using the Fold 6 instead of my iPhone 15 Pro Max? Well, I have to say I'm still more of a pro iPhone user than I am an Android user. Even with the larger display, the ability for split screen apps, the better file management system, the Fold 6 with Android just is not enough to pull me away from the iPhone. And that mostly comes from the fact that I am more ingrained in the Apple ecosystem. I like having my phone sitting on the desk and being able to respond to text messages and do all of those things easily from my Mac. And then if I jump over to an iPad, I don't have to worry about trying to find apps or figure out which browser I was in so that I could still connect and respond to text messages. If I want to leave my phone at home, I can easily do that with my Apple Watch with cellular. Of course, I could do that with the Galaxy Watch as well, but I just don't feel as comfortable doing so with the Galaxy Watch than I do with the Apple Watch. And so there are some things that I know would become easier for me with time, but after about 2 weeks, I still find myself wanting to gravitate back towards the iPhone. For me personally, I don't think the larger display that comes within the foldable phone is the right size and provides enough utility for me to want an all-in-one device where I still might want to grab my iPad mini, which has a bigger display than this and is a separate device that I could leave behind if I want. I don't have to take it with me. I don't have to sacrifice some things like, is my phone going to be safe because I don't have a giant case wrapped around it? I don't have to think about that with my iPhone because my iPhone has a sufficient case on it. I don't have to worry about dropping my phone because I need to hold it maybe 2 hands, or I have to have some sort of adapter on the back of it to make me feel more secure holding the phone, because the iPhone is the right size for me to hold, and it's a big enough display to where I can get everything done. You can see I'm a little bit torn here, and maybe this is for a conversation that we need to have down in the comment section where we discuss some of these things further. There is no perfect phone that fits every single need without some sort of drawbacks in one way or another. Every device is going to have features that work for some situations and lack features for another. I recognize that. There are things that I wish the iPhone had that Android has and iPhone probably never will have. And a lot of that comes down to variability in shape and size of design and additional features that you get in something like the Fold 6. So let's talk about it down in the comment section below. If you're thinking about picking up a Fold 6 or some Galaxy Buds or a Galaxy Ultra Watch or something like that, check out the links in the description. Those links help support the channel, so I appreciate it when you click on those. I hope that you found this conversation useful. It's definitely fun for me to talk about my experiences, and I definitely enjoy talking about my experiences with other people, so let's do that down in the comment section below. If you found this video useful, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you back in another one soon. Take care.